the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. The mayors from the entire length of the Mississippi River in all 10 states come together and work toward lifting this entire region, all of Middle America, from Minnesota to Louisiana. Not just the waterway itself, but also our individual cities and the collective region of the 10-state corridor together. It's necessary because of the Mississippi River's importance to the nation and the planet. So 40% of the world's food supply comes out of the Mississippi River Basin. 1 in 12 people on Earth eat food that began or is made with materials and commodities from the Mississippi River Basin. So it's absolutely critical to the planet. And that economy, $500 billion in annual revenue for the United States, 1.5 million jobs directly on the water, and then millions more as you move out into the cities and counties surrounding the river valley. It is an absolute essential component to the economy of North America and the United States and national security. So it must be protected. It must be conserved, sustained, and we have to build resilience into that giant ecological system whose environmental services provide not only economy for us and manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism, but it also provides drinking water to 50 cities, 20 million people at least, more most likely. So this resource is absolutely critical and vital to the United States.
This is the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. It comprises of 102 mayors, a bipartisan group of mayors, stretching all the way from the headwaters of the Mississippi, from the Bemidji, Minnesota, going all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. Greenville is one of those cities. I'm fortunate to be the co-chair of this organization of mayors, along with my friend, co-chair Jim Strickland of Memphis. It's a wonderful organization where we not only talk about the strength of the river, the commonality that we all share in the river, but also its benefit to all of the cities and towns on the river, but more importantly, for food quality, water quality for the country and the world. We have worked with Ducks Unlimited for quite some time to look at nature-based solutions to help with disaster impacts, to reduce the risk of disaster impacts, but also the flooding that cities and towns receive day in and day out with flash flooding or these 1,000-year floods that we're seeing. And so this nature-based solution is innovative in one way, but it's environmentally sound, it's economically beneficial to our industries, but also on the physical side, it helps lessen the burden, if you will, on the folks that we represent day in and day out. To build things up, sometimes it costs infrastructure. We know the bipartisan infrastructure money is out there. We want to thank the Biden-Harris administration for that. We also know the Inflation Act has come out. We want to thank them for that as well. But looking and partnering with P3 organizations like DU and some of our private partners to look at nature-based solutions is really the way to go, because it lessens the burden on the folks that we represent.
Good morning. My name is David Goins, and I'm the mayor of Alton, Illinois. Welcome to Horseshoe Lake State Park. Though we are technically standing in Pontoon Beach, Illinois, what you see positioned behind me extending all the way to the Mississippi River is the city of Madison. I'm very proud to be a part of today's demonstration of natural infrastructure at work to absorb climate risk and disaster events for our region. The project that we will be profiling today is being delivered by a partnership between the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative and Ducks Unlimited. Flooding and storms impacts have been worsening throughout the Metro East region of the St. Louis area for several years now. The cities along the Mississippi are in an arc from Grafton, Illinois to Sauget, Illinois, and have been working together to find ways that we can make our cities more resilient. Augmenting natural assets like Horseshoe Lake can be a cost-effective part of this solution. On July 26, happens to be my wife and I's birthday, an axis of intense rainfall from Montgomery County, Missouri to St. Clair County, Illinois resulted in our region sustaining from 8 to 11 inches of precipitation in just over 8 hours, amounting to a new record of rainfall in one day. Like Mayor Broome of Baton Rouge experienced in her city in 2016, this was our 100-year rain event. And it was a devastating time. It just missed, fortunately, it just missed Alton by a few miles, but the rest of the region really were impacted by this flooding. So now, since we have already been working on the Horseshoe Lake project, we were able to see this natural infrastructure project in action and determine its effectiveness, even though it is not yet complete. The mayors have been calling for more natural infrastructure to address climate change along our corridor. We know these assets work because we saw them performing during the flood of 2019. But extreme flash flooding events like the one in this region on July 26 was a record event. I'm pleased to say that what we're building can help us in our new record-setting storms too. And we're not just deploying these projects in this region, but along our entire river. Now I'd like to recognize Dr. Karen Waldrop, Chief Conservation for Ducks Unlimited, and Mike Sertle of Ducks Unlimited to explain this work further and to give important details about this project that you see behind me.
Thank you. So this location is both a success story and it's also a glimpse into what's possible going forward into the future, because Horseshoe Lake State Park is a tangible example of a conservation success story. All right, it's a proof of how we can improve water quality for residents, quality of life for residents, and help with flooding issues up and down the Mississippi, all while providing habitat for many species of fish, wildlife, and waterfowl as well. Ducks Unlimited's mission is wetlands and waterfowl conservation. And this is what it actually looks like, what we're looking at today. This project is a unique example of the St. Louis confluence region. But it's also one of numerous efforts happening from Minnesota all the way to Louisiana. Mayors from every part of the river are looking for ways to protect their communities from floods. They're looking for ways to improve water quality for their residents, and they need to do it with budgets that are tighter than ever. Today at Horseshoe Lake State Park, we're going to look at a prime example of natural infrastructure. Restoring and improving wetlands along the river will at scale benefit our economies, our communities, and our livelihoods. Horseshoe Lake, just to give a little bit of an overview of this area and kind of the size and the capacity of a type of project like this, what it can accomplish. It receives rain runoff from 17,000 acres of surrounding land. This runoff can back up in the lake, which is going to cause flooding issues that we just heard about all throughout the area. And the impacts can be even further downstream as well. Our involvement, again with the help of Illinois Department of Natural Resources, is helping to provide some relief. We recently completed a wetlands conservation project that's almost directly behind me. I was trying to look earlier to see where it is. It's almost directly behind me, that adds an additional 30 surface acres of floodwater storage, and this is called Rasky Slough. So that is nearly 40 million gallons at full capacity of what that's going to be able to do. So to put that in a little bit of reference of what it was able to do with the 2019 floods. The next phase, what we're going to be doing is kind of back here to my right. So what we're going to be doing there is replacing water pumps on the site. And we're going to hopefully take a look at that here in a few minutes. But these pumps, what they're going to be able to do, what we heard about those flash flood events that we just heard about, it's going to be able to decrease the amount of time that to remove the water from the area. So it's going to decrease it from 25 days to 5 days. And that's spectacular and really important. And altogether, these improvements are going to increase the stormwater storage capacity of this lake at Horseshoe Lake fourfold, which is a wonderful thing. And that's going to be 250 million gallons of water that can be stored at capacity. Additional upcoming projects here have the potential to restore hundreds of acres of floodplain while also capturing hundreds of millions of gallons of Mississippi River floodwaters in the heart of the St. Louis metro area. All of this while providing habitat for wildlife. It's just an absolute success story how we're helping people and wildlife in this wonderful place that we all live up and down the Mississippi River. It is the heart of the United States, and it is absolutely important that we continue these incredible efforts with these wonderful people that are standing up here with me today. The impact of human development along the Mississippi is really difficult to understand. We have altered the landscape, and in some ways, almost beyond repair in many places. And the draining of wetlands directly impacts the flooding and water quality issues that we're facing today across the United States. And Horseshoe Lake is a tremendous project, but it just isn't enough. The spot can provide relief for moderate rainfalls that we've been talking about, but it alone can't protect us from historic rainfall events that are becoming more and more common every year. We need many, many more Horseshoe Lake projects up and down the Mississippi River to make a huge difference. And we are very proud, Ducks Unlimited is extremely proud to be partnering with the MRCTI and these wonderful mayors that are here with me today. These mayors are eager to explore new solutions for growing problems, and Ducks Unlimited and our partners are eager to help provide these answers. Thank you very much.
Here at Horseshoe Lake, with the draining of the large part of the Metro East, as you see here, if you travel up 111 or up 3, there's more and more development. So we have things that are historically ag fields, and that was already providing inputs. If you drive around the lake, you can see really bad sedimentation. Behind me is a peninsula that used to be an island. It's all sedimented in across the bottom from inputs. So as we see that transition into more of a development, we see hardening. So we don't even have the absorption of water into the ground table. We're getting runoff faster. It's coming off parking lots, it's coming off roofs. It's hitting the whole system faster than it used to. So to start addressing this, we have to look at how do we increase the capacity of our infrastructure. So 2 projects here on this part of the park. One, we completed the Rasky Slough project that Karen had spoken about. For the purposes of wildlife habitat management, that entire 60-acre wetland was dry when we took that big rain event. So we were able to capture all 40 million gallons that otherwise would have just kept running down into the communities. With the project here, off to my right, the lower end, it's facing these structures they had, the pump system they had 20, 30 years ago, could handle what the landscape of this part of the Metro East looked like. They can't anymore. They can't handle the amount of input that's coming in. The lake itself is filling in, the lower end's filling in, so we're losing storage capacity from sedimentation. So that's why we're looking at addressing increasing the infrastructure size, capability, and capacity to maintain the habitat, the recreational benefit, but also give us, as we've talked, designing the infrastructure to be natural infrastructure that we can have the best of both worlds. We can help to manage stormwater and floodwater and still have recreation for our communities.
I will add, of course, you look at these nature-based solutions, of course, working with DU, not only is it environmentally sound, ecologically sound, but with these mayors up here, of course, it lessened the tax burden on the folks we represent. So those nature-based solutions are innovative, but they're a way where we don't have to put that cost, whether increased sewer rates or water rates, to try to keep the flooding away on the dry side of where our folks are, but use the nature that God has blessed us with and the partnership with private partnerships like DU and other folks to make sure that we lessen the burden on our folks as well.
When we look at the keys to sustainability and resiliency in the city of La Crosse, long-term goals is really to deal with stormwater and flooding of all kinds. And so finding ways to divert water, whether it be from from heavy rains or from river flooding, either way, we need to find ways to do that. And so identifying methods, including retention ponds and things like that, where we can not only divert but store the water, really will help us, not only in making sure that we have water storage, but also when that water then gets pumped back out to the river, that it's cleaner than it would have been as it was running off, say, from hard surfaces like parking lots and streets and industrial lots and things like that. So these are essential. This is essential for the city of La Crosse, not only for sustainability, but also to really address the hundreds and hundreds of homes that are currently in a floodplain, to get them out of the floodplain potentially, and also to so they can help improve their homes and quality of life as well.
Where I'm from, it's flat land, low area, so you know, we do have a lot of flooding, especially flash floods. So, you know, developing these wetlands would definitely, you know, help in our area from the flash floods.
Oh, it would be great for our town that we experienced one of the worst floodings in Alton, Illinois in 2019, and so anything would help.
Big neon bright light.
Why is wetlands so important to your area?
These aluminum cans
Well,
are not beer.
it's a natural infrastructure.
water.
It helps absorb the water. It helps in breeding the ecosystem and all animal life and plant life, and it's so important.
Well, since '08, our community has been through a flood 9 times. And when we have to build an 8-foot wall in order to protect our downtown area, obviously we are concerned with what to do with the water. At this point, we're trying to have a flood defense system established in our community. That will take care of one part of it, but that doesn't take care of the surrounding areas, the farmlands, etc. If the water can be diverted, if the water can be placed somewhere else, if the water can be utilized some other way in some other situation, obviously it would make a huge difference.
It would benefit us greatly because if you know, we have a lot of flooding areas in Vicksburg and in the North Delta part of the state of Mississippi. We've been working on this for years with the Corps of Engineers and with the environmental people and everything to try to see it. Right now we're talking about pumps, but I believe that if we can do some of this, it can help us mitigate it.
How important is wetlands to your area?
Well, wetlands are important anywhere in America because what you want to do is to be able to do conservation. You want to be able to preserve. I think there's enough land, enough water for all of us to try to work together in what's in the best interest of the United States and in the Mississippi River area.
Dubuque has a long history of flooding. I mean, going all the way back to when we first built the flood wall in the 1960s. So, you know, since we've had that flood wall, we've had a lot more success, but flooding is absolutely an issue on both sides of the flood wall. I mean, that's the thing that we need to think about. You know, the river lives with us in all the places where we are. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to stay in front of the floods that could come our way and make sure that we're resilient in those disasters.
South Louisiana is one of the areas that has been targeted in some of our special programs and projects that will be launched to mitigate flooding. And of course that involves our coastal areas, our wetlands. And one of our goals, as you well know, is to manage water, but do it with the environment in mind and not being so aggressive to obstruct the natural habitats of our environment. And so that is part of what this project will do. But more importantly, as I said, the focus is water mitigation, flood mitigation.
In our area, we're off the Mississippi, but at the same time being farmland, it's an awful flat land area. And what this will do is to allow for us to be able to move that water away from the farm crops and put it back into the tributaries to allow for the wetlands, and it'd just be good for the habitat for our wildlife. And again, that just helps take the stress off of the infrastructures, and especially in small towns in the Delta, always have a large stress on the infrastructure inside their cities.
In the city of Gretna, it's been going on now for probably about 15 years. We started dealing with resilience and water retention probably back in the early 2000s when we dug our first retention pond. Since then, we've been expanding retention area in what we now reference as our resilience district. So the most southern end of our district, where we have the most repetitive loss properties in the country, for sure in the state, but close to being the most repetitive, lost properties in the nation, is why we were awarded the grant we were awarded. We're doing expansion of retention. We're recognizing where is the driest areas in this space and where is it supposed to be wet, and developing meadows and developing play space and quality of life area in the drier sections.
It's invested in the overall health of the Mississippi as all of the cities along this way. And obviously every city has its challenges, but ultimately a healthy Mississippi is a good thing for our city.
What I was amazed by is the $500 billion economy that Mississippi River creates for over 120 cities across the whole corridor. It's real powerful economic engine. But more importantly, I heard just a few minutes ago that the mayors in the room get the job done. That's fascinating to hear that. So congratulations. What I want to talk about in the next 5-10 minutes, if there's one message I want to get across to the mayors and others in this room, is the importance of digitizing your water systems. I'm not talking about the river, I'm talking about the infrastructure within your city. Both the river and the infrastructure in your city are inexplicably connected, and I want to focus on that aspect of the business. We realize the importance of water when we don't have it, like we are seeing on the western parts of our country, or when we have too much of it, with the floods and the damage it creates to our streets and homes, etc. What I find fascinating is that we focus when we have contaminated water. This graph represents the darker the color is, more water quality violations that exist in that part of the country. As you can see down the Mississippi River, as you go further down the south, it's harder and harder to treat those waters. In fact, the darker the color also represents lower socioeconomic condition of that city. So they are connected. Lower socioeconomic conditions, lower incomes, and lower water quality. We also worry about when sewer overflows. These floods, the rains, the intensity of the rains have increased dramatically, the frequency of them increased, and our infrastructure cannot handle the volume of these rains that we see. So you get sewer overflows and your watersheds are polluted. The issue here is that we are dealing with 21st century water challenge with the 20th century infrastructure. Unfortunately, we can't raise the rates because it's an immense burden on our residents, and the federal funding isn't enough yet. This problem is getting amplified because of this great resignation. I assume everybody's familiar with the great resignation during COVID. Everybody wants to retire, they want to move on, they don't want to work, right? And I know I spoke to some of your mayors last night. They said they have a hard time finding police officers, firemen, etc. But it is the case also in the water infrastructure. On top of it, we have silver tsunami. There's a whole slew of 60s and 50s workforce that want to retire. The risk here is that you're losing very important operating knowledge. The water wastewater infrastructure is technical in nature, and not knowing how the pumps operate, how the treatment plant works, how to maintain those pipes creates a serious risk to your city. So the question is, what do we do, right? And at this moment, in the next 10 years, we recommend that cities need to start digitizing their infrastructure. What does it really mean, right? To sense, to predict, to act, and to capture knowledge. There's enough sensors out there, enough computing power exists, so we can be forewarned of issues. And people might say, well, we need to rebuild the infrastructure first, and then we can put all these fancy sensors. Today, we use Apple Watch. We don't need Apple Watch to measure heartbeat for a 20-year-old young kid. We need Apple Watch to measure the heartbeat for a 65-year-old gentleman. Same way, we need to sense this old infrastructure so we can predict, act, and capture knowledge. What I would advise to the mayors here gathering is that they should digitize their water infrastructure so they can predict, act, sense, and capture the digital knowledge. This would allow our infrastructure to operate to handle 21st century water challenges.
We have initiated a number of wetlands restoration projects up and down the Mississippi with many of you. But for those of you who are not familiar with our work, I should begin with really why Ducks Unlimited. Aren't you guys that crazy bunch that just has these dinners and raffles and maybe you can win a shotgun or a art print or a trip to go somewhere? Why is Ducks Unlimited at MRCTI, and what can you do to support my city, my town, and my natural infrastructure? And it really goes back to the 1930s. Yes, Ducks Unlimited was founded by duck hunters. And in the 1930s, we were in the midst of the Dust Bowl. Farmers and rural communities were being devastated, and our wildlife populations across North America were being devastated as well. And it was a group of leaders who came together and said, it really begins with protecting natural habitat, and the habitat that we were established to protect was wetland habitat. In the 1930s, when a group of committed conservationists said, we need to do more to save wetlands, it was a pretty novel concept. They were swimming upstream against the conventional wisdom of their neighbors at the time. In fact, I would say that up until recently, no one, not corporate America, not the government, no one valued wetlands until recently as much as our forebears did in Ducks Unlimited, who recognized that wetlands are not just the breeding grounds for ducks, but for hundreds of wildlife species. They recognized early on that it's the kidney for our water systems, removing nutrients, removing pollutants, cleaning up that water, that coastal wetlands are the shock absorber for hurricanes, that they get the brunt of the power of these storms that all of us are seeing more and more frequently. And they absorb the harm rather than our homes, our neighborhoods, our cities, our towns. That river wetlands absorb the surge, the pulse of floods that are increasingly more damaging and more frequent, with the 2019 flood costing taxpayers over $20 billion. Ducks Unlimited valued those wetlands, admittedly, for their value to ducks before anybody else valued wetlands. But what we now know is that what we learned in wetland science over the last 85 years has put us in a position to be your partner to deliver restored wetlands, protecting existing wetlands, and what is now an emerging approach of using those wetlands as natural infrastructure. And that's why we are here to apply those 85 years of experience and science and knowledge and actual delivered results to MRCTI. You see, over the last 85 years, Ducks Unlimited has conserved and restored over 15 million acres of wetlands. So we don't just talk about it. We don't just encourage people to write their congressman about it. We roll up our sleeves and do it. And north of the border, working with our indigenous partners, we're on the verge of having crossed the 1 billion acre mark in the Canadian boreal forest. So we know of what we speak. So that's why DU, that dollar from that raffle ticket at the dinner, at the volunteer fire department, or at the Legion Hall in your community, draws down $5 and $6 and $7 from our state partners, our federal partners, our corporate partners that delivers these projects on the ground. Whether it's 1,500 acres on the Mississippi River across from the Pyramid in Memphis, or projects in the upper Mississippi, projects in the Louisiana Delta, and we are scaling up our delivery. And you can't wipe the smile off the faces of our scientists who you'll hear from later this morning, because it was announced just about 2 hours ago that USDA, recognizing our leadership role in wetlands, has awarded us an $80 million grant for work to be done with the rice industry as part of Climate Smart Solutions.
Well, Ducks Unlimited, for over 85 years, has been the world leader in wetlands conservation. And the Mississippi River, which encompasses 31 states, it's the artery of continental America. We've lost 2/3 of our wetlands in that watershed. And Ducks Unlimited is partnering with these mayors, those 31 states, and all of the communities up and down the Mississippi and her tributaries to restore those wetlands. And the benefit of that is well beyond ducks. It's coastal resilience, it's flood mitigation. It is a form of natural infrastructure that also provides benefits to wildlife and people. And so this is really a celebration of this 10-year partnership with all of the mayors up and down the Mississippi, and a renewed commitment to apply what Ducks Unlimited has learned in wetlands restoration science to the new natural infrastructure challenges of our era.
How do you balance out flood control along the Mississippi River with initiative of creating more wetlands?
It's going to have to take both. There are places where you're going to have to continue to use that traditional infrastructure, but we've learned over the many, many floods that sometimes you just can't build the levee high enough. Nature gets it right. And so those areas where wetlands are the kidney, wetlands are the shock absorber for those surging floods that we're seeing more and more frequently, and nobody designs and builds and restores those wetlands better than Ducks Unlimited.
The Mississippi River is a drainage system for 40% of the continental U.S. and 31 states. Plastic litter easily travels through storm drains and tributaries to the Mississippi River, to the Gulf, and to the ocean. And as the river ebbs and flows, plastic waste is either left in our cities or it makes its way to the Gulf and to the ocean. The Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative was designed to address this problem. MRCTI joined forces with the United Nations Environment Program and the University of Georgia and local governments, all the mayors, organizations, and communities to make this initiative a reality. The intent of the initiative is to take a plastic pollution snapshot through community science using the Marine Debris Tracker. Since April 2021, 10 cities have accomplished citywide data collection, starting with Baton Rouge, St. Louis, and St. Paul, followed by the Quad Cities, Bettendorf and Davenport, Iowa, Rock Island, Moline, and East Moline, Illinois, and then just recently, the cities of Rosedale and Greenville, Mississippi. This data will help determine where, what, and how plastic waste makes its way into our cities. The information will also be used to help policymakers, businesses, and citizens take action. And it already has, and I bet you'll hear about the EPA Gulf of Mexico grants that have been awarded for plastic waste reduction in the cities of St. Louis, Memphis, and Baton Rouge. MRCTI is working with these cities, along with Jeff Keeney at LSU Ag Center in Baton Rouge, and Sunny Hutton and with Redbud and Jess Watson with Earth Day 365 here in St. Louis, and collaborating with Clean Memphis's Janet Boscarino for the Memphis grant. We really hope to make an impact on the amount of plastic waste in our cities.
Hundreds of community members have participated. They covered targeted areas along the river to really understand the movement and accumulation of plastic. As you heard, we use Debris Tracker. This is an open source citizen science tool that we developed at UGA. It's free and open, and everyone has access to the data. So within dedicated time frames in each city, we spent about 3 to 4 weeks doing this. We looked at the extent and type of litter that can make its way to the river. This was characterized scientifically by community members, partners, volunteers, through a random distributed transect system that we developed specifically for this project. And we covered an area of over 30,000 football fields. Oh, that's good, that's where I wanted to be. So over 136,000 litter items have been documented in the basin, with the top items as cigarette butts. Second are food wrappers. We also see beverage bottles, and then plastic foam fragments. As you know, plastic doesn't biodegrade, it simply fragments over time. So this means the litter has been in the environment for some time. Foam and plastic cups, aluminum cans, hard plastic fragments, and then plastic bags. Nearly 80% of the people who were logging litter for this project picked up that litter. So that means that over 85,000 litter items have been prevented from entering the Mississippi River as a part of this project. In addition, many partner organizations led cleanups and removed even more trash from the environment. So all of the cities have really reported that they face obstacles of time, resources, money, and prioritization with how to address this issue. And so it's so exciting to see that the mayors have used this data to obtain grants and bring stakeholders together to really have those conversations within the community about what interventions make sense for them.
First, EPA has a sizable amount of money going to support states and communities from both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Implementing these laws sits at the very top of our list of priorities. They are historic opportunities to make unprecedented contributions to our country's health and safety. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law will invest more than $50 billion nationally in EPA's water infrastructure programs. That's billion with a B, as the administrator likes to say. And EPA will also work with communities to address waste, recycling, and pollution prevention needs. $350 million for solid waste and recycling grants, $100 million for pollution prevention. In addition, the Inflation Reduction Act is another historic commitment to build a climate-resilient economy and communities. And a significant focus in our implementation is to address environmental justice concerns. In fact, environmental justice is built into all of our work at EPA. Equal access to healthy living is a basic human right. It should not be a privilege. We've launched a new effort to support communities by making the grant process more intuitive and user-friendly, and we are providing technical assistance to communities. Some of the services offered include grant writing and proposal assistance, meeting facilitation, and translation services for limited English-speaking communities. Mississippi River corridor communities with environmental justice concerns certainly qualify for this support. And we've already been hard at work with MRCTI to address a number of issues, including stopping waste from entering the river, particularly plastics. Astonishingly, up to 40% of the plastic pollution entering the Gulf of Mexico originates from the mighty Mississippi. And up to 80% of all plastics in the Gulf originate from land-based sources. This plastic material breaks down over time into tiny pieces that impact fish and other wildlife. In Region 7, we are thrilled that the Gulf of Mexico Division recently expanded part of their grant program to include our states for issues like trash-free waters. As an agency, we are very pleased to partner with MRCTI on several important areas. It was 1 year ago this week, I believe, during MRCTI's 10th annual meeting that we jointly announced our landmark Memorandum of Understanding. This partnership engages 4 EPA regions, 4, 5, 6, and 7, to work with communities on a number of priorities, including sustainably managing waste and reducing plastic pollution in the Mississippi River. The community-driven work we have underway and are also planning with MRCTI and Mississippi River Corridor communities will be supported by the funding provided under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. In closing, just let me say that I share EPA Administrator Regan's vision for building strong community ties through connecting and organizing with all of you. I know we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we are committed to working with you to build resilient, healthy communities along the river. So we'll do that through innovation and, of course, through partnerships. Thank you.
Community-wide changes that promote trash reduction and prevention along the Mississippi River are possible thanks to community-driven efforts. Not only those of us that are at the table, but those who we represent and who entrust us every single day to represent those interests. And these partnerships with stakeholders in the Mississippi Rivers, Cities, and Towns initiative, the Clean Memphis Organization, and LSU's Agricultural Center, are 3 grant recipients here today. EPA and Region 4 and the Gulf of Mexico Division stands with you, along with our colleagues in Region 7, as proud supporters of the Gulf of Mexico trash-free waters. Since 2018, we've provided nearly $13 million in funding, and we're excited to expand our efforts by providing nearly $500,000 to each of you and these organizations today, which is so important and critical to where we are. Since Meg is so competitive, and we're always talking about sports, and she had me up early doing a jog to the Arc. I want to give a quote by Vince Lombardi that says, "The only place you find success before work is in the dictionary." And we have a lot of work to do. There is so much that we're proud of and that we celebrate as an agency, but we understand the tremendous task and the work and the effort that will go into it. The funding for these organizations will help to support vital work in communities like Scotlandville and Old South Baton Rouge that are in the heart of what has been widely named Cancer Alley. The ever-widening corridor of the petrochemical plants where nearly 150 oil refineries, plastics plants, and chemical facilities were located. We also know that Compass Community Schools in Memphis will receive enhanced hands-on STEM education and development around solid waste reduction. Proposed outputs include the installation of a modern water refill stations, and the development of public and school campaigns to engage and encourage refillable water usage so that we can maintain our commitments to clean water across the board. Furthering the ecological health of Mississippi River and the economic importance to the many people whose livelihood, culture, and recreation is based on a thriving and healthy river system, which we plan and intend to support, and is an absolute priority within EPA and all of our 10 regions. With over $50 billion, as it was stated for the 3rd time, committed to water infrastructure through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we are committed to the success of this region. And I'll leave you with a quote that says, "If you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far, run with others." On behalf of myself and Region 7, Region 4, we are committed to not only making this a marathon and not a sprint. There's a lot of work ahead of us, and at this time, I want to thank you for allowing us to be here on behalf of Administrator Michael Regan and the administration, and would like to call up those cities that we have mentioned earlier so that we can recognize you in this room. Mayor Broome, I know you're here, but I don't see the other 2. So, Mayor Strickland. We're going to make it work. And again, while they're coming up, if we can just thank them by a round of applause, we're very proud and privileged to be able to support them.
Just a few weeks back, I was in Mississippi, in the Delta region, in the Yazoo River Basin, which many of you know has been also dealing with many flooding issues. And I had the opportunity to go to a listening session to really hear, in the town of Rolling Fork, to hear about the ongoing challenges that they've been having. And there was maybe several hundred people in this high school auditorium talking about 2019 and 6 months of standing water and the ongoing challenges that they continue to face. And one thing continued to stand out to me. It's something you in this room already know, that the futures of everyone on the Mississippi River are interconnected in so many ways. We heard the mayor of Baton Rouge talk about just how resilience along the corridor is about the interconnectedness and how that is a core piece of really building resilience.
The Mississippi River provides innumerable social, cultural, economic benefits to all of us here in the room. That's really why we're here. And it does this because it's a diverse and productive ecosystem. For example, it provides us all with clean drinking water. It supports over 40% of the nation's migratory waterfowl, over 140 species of fish, over 40 species of mussels, 600 species of plants. The list really goes on and on. But how is this ecosystem that we all care so much about doing? And that was the central question of this report that we recently released. We are seeing more water in the river more of the time. And this is not probably a new story to you, but we're really, everywhere we looked, we saw that increasing flows in the river. I'll go more into that. We've seen floodplain forest loss occurring throughout the system. Third, we continue to see high nutrient loads and high nutrient concentrations, but we have seen some declines in phosphorus throughout the system. Nitrogen remains a troublesome one and remains challenging for Gulf hypoxia. Fourth, we are seeing clearer water in the river, and this has been really valuable for the resurgence of a diversity of aquatic plants, which are critical for aquatic habitat. And finally, the river continues to support a diverse and abundant assemblage of fishes, like I said, over 140 species. But as many of you well know, invasive carps have made a big impact in certain parts of the river system, in particular in the Illinois River. So I just want to leave you with a couple key thoughts from this report and in general. First, this report and our program is really the fruit of a long-term partnership of many agencies, like I mentioned, and many dedicated individuals that have gone out there throughout the year, through the ice, and collected these data all year long. So really a testament to a partnership like you guys have here that has allowed us to show you the data today. And secondly, I just want to emphasize the critical importance of these long-term data to really tell us how the investments we made in the river are doing, are those making a difference, and allowing us to adapt into the future and understand how the river works so that we can better manage the river to be a healthy one into the future.
To support this heritage and to support the communities, the French Heritage Society chapter, the president is here today, she has established this Chicago chapter as an excellent resource, offering a website, grants, developing programs to amplify and strengthen further the long-standing ties of Franco-American friendship. At the heart of its mission, this organization, French Heritage Society in Chicago, has launched 18 months ago a very important initiative called the French Heritage Corridor. It's primarily at supporting uniting the of local communities to promote the French heritage in Midwest. This initiative acts as a network to better access these sites and communities while lending support for a wide range of stakeholders. The launch of the French Heritage Corridor initiative happened not far from here, in the small town of Prairie du Rocher, I say in French, in the state of Illinois, where the governor of French Louisiana, Pierre Duguay de Boisbriand, built the Fort de Chartres in 1718. I know that the local community in Prairie du Rocher is especially active in protecting this heritage. I must also refer, Mayor, to the marvelous city of St. Genevieve, Missouri, on the other side of the river, and which was the first permanent European settlement in Missouri, and now, thanks to your efforts, a national historical park. Ladies and gentlemen, I was keen on being with you today to draw your attention on this initiative by American Association but which has, of course, the whole support of my country, of my support, of course, as ambassador, but also the whole support of my country, France. Even if our common history belongs to the past, it can serve as a foundation upon which we can build future friendships and relations between our countries. And the overarching goal of this French Heritage Corridor is to stimulate community-powered cultural, economic development, integrating preservation of the heritage, education, including bilingual education. It's a wonderful opportunity to forge people-to-people connections, exchanges, partnerships, higher education, science, but also economy, business links, in particular tourism. I am convinced indeed that the opportunities the French Heritage Corridor offers to the region as a whole through the growth of tourism is huge. In this respect, we thought MRCTI was really the appropriate forum for launching a discussion with political decision makers, with economic decision makers. The objective is to explore the ways of making this initiative a significant dimension of your respective development strategies, collectively or individually. This is the reason why, indeed, as you said, Mayor, a panel discussion dedicated with this great project with the French Heritage Society, with people coming from Minnesota who are here today, with the Development Agency of Missouri, will be organized later today. This French Heritage Corridor project is full of opportunities, which I'm sure will contribute to your own goals. And for instance, how can this Heritage Corridor help building partnerships with school districts in order to contribute to educate young generations about the importance of the waterway? How can this Heritage Corridor help mobilizing resources to modernize infrastructures, preserve natural and historical resources? How can this Heritage Corridor feed into the catalogs of destination organizations or tour operators? We could expand at length the list of these questions, and I hope this afternoon's panel discussion will open fruitful perspectives.
You'll see, sort of just in the face of food and the average price of food for the American consumer, there has been quite a seismic shift in the cost of living. You then have, on top of that, exceptional drought conditions around the world. So I don't know how clearly you can see this map, but hopefully the reds are showing out the oranges. What this is showing is we have a drought index. It's a daily index that measures drought on a scale of 0 to 5. So think of it as the US Drought Monitor, but updates every day and updates for the whole world, and gives you a sense for what the severity and intensity of drought is for the whole world on a daily basis on a scale of 0, which is no drought, to 5, which is exceptional drought. And what you see is, this is a snapshot from September 6th. You'll just see large swaths of orange and sort of red distributed around the world. And the first thing you ask is this normal for this time of year, or is something off? So what we do is we now look at that index versus a 10-year average of this point in time. So looking at basically the September period for the last 10 years and looking at the difference. And you'll basically see the Midwest, core parts of South America, which are major producing regions as well of sort of agricultural products, East Africa, Europe, which is facing a record drought, and parts of Asia. This is at a scale we have actually not seen before. So if you look at the Northern Hemisphere, which is producing today, about 30% of the Northern Hemisphere that grows crops is in drought this year. That curve on a sort of, you look at it on a sort of annual rolling basis, is the highest it's been in over 20 years. You know, you see price increases in the UK and the EU at 5.5x year on year. What that has meant is that the price of producing ammonia fertilizer in the EU has gone up to about $2,800 a ton. The most expensive form of fertilizer they can sell is $1,000 a ton. So right now you're seeing massive capacity shutdowns across Europe because it doesn't make any economic sense to actually produce the fertilizer. What this actually means for nitrogen-based fertilizers is really an impact for next year, where it's not just an affordability issue for farmers potentially, it's actually just an availability issue. And as you all know, you kind of need to reapply nitrogen every year. And so this is something we're watching out for as sort of a next year issue. So this is how it's played out for actual fertilizer prices. And again, you see it coming off a little bit over the last couple of months, but that's almost irrelevant because that's somewhat seasonal. And where this will really matter is if we continue to have capacity shutdowns across the winter, then that will impact the availability for the Q1 purchases that happen, which is sort of the bulk of purchases for fertilizer that occur here.
The Corn Belt ports are simply the ports inside the lock and dam system in the upper Mississippi River Basin to include the Illinois waterway. They're important because over 100 million tons of product gets shipped in and out of that region. You just can't ignore that. It's got national and global significance. Well, one of the issue is that it had never been really recognized as ports or port regions within the lock and dam system. So it's just very important. It helps build the awareness of the value to the nation and really the global supply chain of the Midwest and the nation's largest grain growing region.
We need everyone to be able to restore the ecosystems, protect the rivers and watersheds around the globe. And this brought us to develop the partnership with the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, Adopt a River program, to give the opportunity to all the Rotary clubs around the globe, including here along the Mississippi, so they can sign up and make a commitment to adopt the rivers, their lakes, their watersheds in their communities. This is a great opportunity for all of you as mayors in your cities to be able to connect with your Rotary clubs in your cities and begin that conversation, begin the cooperation on something that is new to the Rotary world, which is working on the environment. But it's something that is essential to all of us. Many of us have been working on this for a long time. Some of them are not still very aware of what's going on, but as we heard today, the more that we educate ourselves, the more we become more proactive on everything to be able to mitigate climate change, protect the rivers, our watersheds, and provide a better world for our kids. Everything we do today, it will either benefit or hurt our children. So I encourage you all to continue to work together, involve your Rotary clubs in your cities, in your region, and let's work together to make our world a better place. Thank you.
You got to have one voice, and that one voice is the Mississippi River. This is her time, and what we have to do is continually, collaboratively work together and have vertical and horizontal integration from the federal government, our state governments, but also this group of bipartisan mayors. You know, we don't see red or blue. What we see is the power and the strength of the river, what it does for our communities, but also what it does for the country and the world.
It's been a successful, very successful conference, so we're poised to pass, see the full Congress pass the first full river ecological restoration program in the history of the U.S. The upper rivers had one for 30 years, but the whole lower half, which receives a lot of destruction and a lot of people's liabilities from the northern half, has had nothing. Now, we're almost there. We're almost at the finish line for the president to sign that into law. So that is absolutely monumental. Secondly, we are now finally deploying natural infrastructure projects with DU. We went to an actual project site where that work is ongoing right now here in the St. Louis region. And then 3, we signed a new agreement with CDP Global to expose our city's infrastructure projects to $2 trillion worth of investment portfolio worldwide. 4th and lastly, the EPA came and awarded 3 grants to our cities in the first ever multi-city coordinated effort for EPA trash-free water grants across the entire Mississippi River. So great progress, new tremendous strides being made for the first time in U.S. history. I'm proud of our mayors.
How can people get more information?
MRCTI.org pretty much has a one-stop shop for all things that happened at this conference and everything that we do as an association. And I would direct folks to our policy platform link in the website. The policy platform outlines the mayor's priorities for this river valley, for the country, to to make it a national priority.